What up, everybody? We are back again, y'all. How is everybody doing? I had taken my braids out. I got some conditioner in my hair, so I just put this hat on, honey. I had to put some conditioner in it. Y'all, listen, I don't know if you guys are familiar with James Comey, but Donald Trump sent a wet behind the ear prosecutor who wasn't even appointed a prosecutor. In fact, the previous prosecutor quit simply because Donald Trump, y'all know how little kid gets when they don't get their way. Donald Trump has a personal vendetta against Comey, wants him to go to jail, all of this bullshit. So we learned that in terms of the grand jury seeing everything for James Comey, they found out in court that it did not happen. And this is more than likely going to be dismissed. Y'all, we finna get into it. Donald Trump and his crooked ass administration. Let's get into the breaking news on this case.
Breaking news from that motions hearing in the James Comey case. Let's get right to our MS Now legal affairs reporter, Fallon Gallagher, who was inside the courtroom. What did you hear and what have we learned?
Yeah, Anna, the biggest headline today had nothing to do with the motion that was actually being considered by the judge. We learned some very important information about what happened with those grand jury proceedings that another judge, a magistrate judge, earlier this week said could amount to misconduct. So basically what we learned is that Lindsey Halligan went into that grand jury room and initially presented a 3-count indictment. We knew this. The grand jury said no true bill to one of those counts and only charged Comey with those 2 counts that they did agree to. Now we know that Lindsey Halligan never actually presented that new 2-count indictment to the grand jury. Instead, they reprinted a draft copy of a proposed indictment with only those 2 counts, and only the foreperson signed it. So this is a really big deal because she never actually presented to the full grand jury the indictment with which James Comey is charged. Now, the judge has asked for the government to look into a case from 1969 that we understand has to do with a similar grand jury proceeding. He's asked for some briefing on that. The defense will respond. But if this is the case, this could be a really big deal, and this could be grounds enough for the Comey defense team to actually have this indictment completely thrown away. Anna?
So how did this even come up in this courtroom, given today's motion was supposed to be about the vindictive and selective prosecution argument?
Yeah, so the judge heard arguments from both sides, the defense first and then the government, about that specific vindictive and selective prosecution argument, which is also very important because they are using that as a motion to dismiss this case as well. But at the very end, when Tyler Lemons, the attorney for DOJ, had finished his questioning, the judge said, hang on, don't sit down yet. I have a few more questions for you, and started asking about that grand jury proceedings that we had discussed earlier this week when the judge issued that order about what happened there. So he asked him very specifically to run through the timeline and how all of this actually played out that day in September when this indictment was turned. He asked whether Lindsey Halligan had, basically he didn't understand how Lindsey Halligan could have had enough time, as we know this was 7 minutes only, to go from presenting to the grand jury to then drafting and presenting a full new indictment. And what we learned was really profound is that she didn't do that. Basically, they just reprinted a new version with only the 2 counts that those grand jurors had agreed to and had the foreperson sign that. And that is what they presented to the judge. And that is the actual charging document against James Comey here. It was never presented to the grand jury. And so this all came at the end of the hearing. The judge is still weighing whether he's going to dismiss this case based on the vindictive and selective prosecution, which is why we were here today. And there was some really important questioning there. He talked a lot about a declination memo, which we were talking about last week here. And the government could not actually answer whether or not they had seen a declination memo. Now, that's all about whether or not the career prosecutor decided that there was enough to actually charge Comey here. He also had some interesting question about some comments that President Trump had made to the press, because the entire Comey defense case here for the vindictive and selective prosecution is that the president has had over 200 public statements where he has expressed his personal animus against Comey. And the defense is arguing that that personal animus is enough to actually dismiss the case because it's vindictive and selective. So the judge introduced some additional comments from the president that the defense had not introduced in their briefing, some comments that the Letitia James team actually has in their memos. But basically, they're saying that the president said that this case needs to happen quick, and whether or not he's guilty or innocent, they need to secure this indictment and charge him. So those questions, the judge seemed very interested in that line of comments from the president and whether or not that could hint that there is vindictive and selective prosecution. All of this is to say is that the judge has not made a decision on that specific motion from the bench today. He said it's complicated and requires much more than a bench decision. So we'll probably hear something from him in the next week, as along with the other outstanding motions. But really, the big news here today is what we learned about those grand jury proceedings. Anna?
So, Fallon, you just laid out so much, and there are all these different prongs of motions to dismiss in this particular case. Today's hearing on the motion to dismiss because of selective and vindictive prosecution. There was the hearing in a different judge's courtroom, I think it was last week, perhaps the week before, if I can get my dates right, related to the motion to dismiss because of what the Comey team and the Letitia James team is saying was an unlawful appointment of Lindsey Halligan to this role as U.S. attorney. And then, of course, there was this additional element that has sprung up related to the grand jury proceedings and questions about missteps, investigative missteps that you just laid out. Which one seems to be moving the fastest in terms of getting to the end result? And if any one of these leads to a dismissal of the case by the court, does that mean it's over? This whole prosecution against James Comey would go away?
Yeah, so any of these, if a judge grants any of these motions to dismiss, then theoretically the case would be dismissed and it would go away. I would say as far as the timeline, we'll probably hear first about Lindsey Halligan. Judge Curry I believe it was last Wednesday, I was standing right here, said that she would expect a decision by Thanksgiving. Now that's next week. So we could hear about what happens with Lindsey Halligan's fate and then subsequently what will happen with the investigation. But that's all to say that Judge Nachmanoff inside this hearing today could rule on these grand jury proceedings soon. He didn't set a specific timeline on when he wants that briefing on that 1969 case that I referenced, but he seemed extremely stunned. I would say the room was so silent that you could hear a pin drop when we learned about what actually happened in that grand jury room. And so I would expect this to continue to move forward. This is a case that has this is a court that has historically moved very quickly. But we still have another set of motions hearings on motions to dismiss set for, I believe, December 9th. So these will all chug along. I don't want to predict exactly when we'll know, but I would imagine in the next few weeks.
And Fallon, one other thing, we know that James Comey's defense lawyers are asking to have his case dismissed with prejudice. What's the significance of that?
Yeah, so that's really significant, and that's a key distinction that they're making in all of their arguments. If you dismiss a case with prejudice, you can't bring it back. In this case, the statute of limitations has already expired now. So if they were to dismiss the case with prejudice, there's no loophole that the government could use to try to bring these charges against James Comey again.
Okay, Fallon Gallagher, stay with me. I want to bring in our senior legal reporter, Lisa Rubin, now. What's your reaction to what just came out of this hearing related to the grand jury? The procedures.
So Anna, I was in another room of our studio working on something unrelated to the Comey matter when I looked up and saw Fallon reporting with you, and I saw the banner, and what I said in reaction is unprintable. So this is a very, very big deal. We knew that something had gone awry with respect to the presentation to the grand jury based on Judge Fitzpatrick's decision the other day. You and I were talking this morning about the fact that Judge Fitzpatrick had sort of said there were three categories of irregularities. One had to do with the use of evidence from old search warrants. One had to do with misstatements of the law that Lindsey Halligan had apparently made when she was before the grand jury. And the third had to do with the way in which the indictment actually was handed down and a gap in recordings of the grand jury proceedings themselves. And what Judge Fitzpatrick had said at that time was there were only 7 minutes between when Lindsey Halligan said in an affidavit that she was handed the 3-count indictment that the grand jury refused to return a true bill on, meaning they had refused one of the counts. And when the hearing started before another magistrate judge in the district, Lindsey Vala, at which the grand jury presented the 2-count indictment with which Jim Comey has been charged. And Judge Fitzpatrick said in his decision, something here doesn't add up. Either Ms. Halligan is mistaken as to the timing, or something went awry in the grand jury because 7 minutes is not enough time to present an indictment all over again to a grand jury, meaning if they refuse the first indictment, you don't have enough time in 7 minutes to then present the second indictment, the one that was returned, the one that was charged.
Now, isn't this so crazy? This lady is so freaking dumb. She didn't even realize the false information that she provided to the court was just not possible. How did you present a case to the grand jury in 7 minutes? They brought back an indictment. This woman needs to be in jail. Like, this is too much. This entire administration is smoking some crack, because this doesn't make sense. Like, you're presenting false information to a judge to indict somebody, and the judge is looking through the paperwork like, wait a minute here, something just doesn't add up, and then they just admit everything. Like, this is unbelievable.
Against Comey to everyone here. And today, based on Fallon's reporting, we now know the answer to that mystery, which was that the full grand jury never saw that indictment. That is the height of prosecutorial misconduct. It is a basis in and of itself for the dismissal of this case. There is a reason that there was stunned silence in the courtroom. The other thing that I can't figure out, and I was looking at my computer right before I came on air with you, the 2-count indictment that was returned against Jim Comey has a signature of Lindsey Halligan, but it also has what appears to be a redacted signature of the grand jury foreperson. So one remaining mystery in voted to indict Jim Comey. If the full grand jury didn't get a presentation on this, who exactly did? And under what pretext was the foreperson of the grand jury, who you have to imagine was never a grand juror before and is relying on prosecutors for the rules of the game?
Well, and
under
remember, Lindsey Halligan hasn't prosecuted a case before. She was the U.S. attorney, the lone signature on this indictment against James Comey, which was by itself super unusual, super eye-opening. What you're describing here, based on what we learned, sounds outrageous, Lisa, but the judge hasn't ruled on this. So what questions do you still have as he weighs a ruling?
Well, first of all, this morning's hearing wasn't on that particular issue, right? It was on the selective and vindictive prosecution of Jim Comey. The question about grand jury misconduct is a motion that hasn't even been made yet by Jim Comey's legal team. Why? Because up until a couple of days ago, they were even fighting for the evidence to support that motion. They had an instinct that something had gone wrong in the grand jury. Where does that instinct come from? It comes from the transcript of the return of the indictment in the first place. That is a transcript that we obtained, and it shows Lindsey Halligan handing simultaneously to that magistrate judge 2 signed instruments. And the magistrate judge says to her, sort of, which of these 2 is the actual charging document here? And she says, oh, I didn't sign both of them. That very confusion was the tip-off to Jim Comey's team that something here had gone wrong, and they followed their instincts.
Unbelievable. We cannot make this shit up. Like, where do we go from here? This lady has never in her entire life prosecuted a case to the point that she gets in the courtroom and don't even know what the hell she's doing. How in the hell do you convict, move forward with a case, and you don't even have a indictment from the grand jury? Girl, that's like elementary. How are you a prosecutor and you don't even have this information? These people are willing to go to hell for Donald Trump. And unfortunately, that is exactly where they're going to end up at, right in hell.
And to CNN regarding former FBI Director James Comey and his fight to get his federal charges dismissed. Crime and Justice correspondent Caitlin Polans is right outside the federal courthouse. Caitlin, what happened in court?
Well, a startling discussion. Less than 1 minute of time passed with no silence in this courtroom as the judge was able to ask the question and got the Justice Department to admit the final indictment that James Comey now faces, the former FBI director. It was never shown to the full grand jury in this courthouse, and they did not approve it in full. They had voted down indicting Comey because they had been asked to approve 3 different charges against him. That indictment was a no from the grand jury, and then there was no further discussion with the prosecutors to bring about the indictment Comey now faces. I want to lay this out a little bit more because I'm sure there will be many legal analysts to talk about this. The judge didn't make any final determinations about the case, and there will be more arguments about this. But what happened in court was that Judge Nachmanoff, after there were many arguments about Donald Trump directing the Justice Department, whether Lindsey Halligan, the prosecutor here, had acted on her own accord to decide to bring this indictment against Comey, Judge Nachmanoff, he began asking the prosecutor to explain why the documents in this case look the way this is, why there was missing time in the grand jury transcript. And things got very intense very quickly. They put on the husher. Both defense team and the prosecution team started whispering to each other very vigorously. And then the judge asked the question. The operative indictment in this case, that document was never shown to the entire grand jury. That is when Tyler Lemons, the prosecutor, standing next to Lindsey Halligan, the U.S. attorney, who was also seated at a counsel table, says, standing in front of you right now, no. There was silence in the courtroom. Judge Nachmanoff sat back in his chair. He looked down. He flipped pages that were in front of them. And then he asked again and stopped Tyler Lemons from answering, called Lindsey Halligan up to the podium. And she also confirmed, no, Your Honor, that the foreperson in open court was the person who had signed the final indictment against Comey. This was the very end of the arguments, the full set of arguments. This was like an additional thing the judge wanted to talk about. And so right after this, the defense counsel for James Comey, Michael Dreeben, he stood up and he said, it appears the operative indictment in this case was never shown to the grand jury and was never returned. That is the conclusion that they should draw, at least on the defense. He's trying to argue to the judge that this is an invalid case and should be outright dismissed. There's going to be more arguments in writing over this by today at 5. That was what the judge began to set up. But we are going to see how this plays out because this is a bit of new information that was very unexpected today and really changes the entire tenor of our understanding of this case and the fight that James Comey's team can bring to it as they try to get it tossed out of this federal courthouse.
I mean, this is a big revelation, Caitlin. Have you ever heard of this happening before? I know we've covered DOJ grand juries for many, many years. I have never heard of a full grand jury not seeing a full indictment.
No, but I will say, Pam, the judge did tell both parties they needed to look up a particular case in a different district because something in that case law may shed light on how they should interpret this new information. But this was a moment in court. I've been in a lot of these hearings in politically charged cases over the years. This was gobsmacking. It was absolute silence. I've said before in this case that there have been moments where people gasped, but this was, you could see the entire room shift. And from then on, this was the only thing that was mattering in that case. This is the only thing that the judge and that others were talking about as they wrapped it up towards the end. I mean, one of the things, too, that was very surprising about this is how much this argument went back to Lindsey Halligan. We've never seen her speak at the podium before. And there was discussion. At one point, the judge even asked, is she a puppet? Is she a stalking horse of Donald Trump just sent in to bring this case? And the prosecutors kept saying, no, she was making decisions on her own. She was even nodding very vigorously about that, sitting at the prosecution table. But then when she stood up to address the judge and confirmed what he then had on the record, that the full grand jury did not return this indictment, she seemed to be in quite an unhappy mood. She was very short with him.
I also think our viewers need to understand the background here for those that aren't following every step, right? Because President Trump put out that now infamous Truth Social post calling on the AG, Pam Bondi, to investigate Comey and Letitia James and Adam Schiff. and mentioned Lindsey Halligan as a potential replacement as the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District because the other one had left, didn't think that there was enough evidence to prosecute Comey. Lindsey Halligan steps in, right? And now this.
That's right. And Pam, what the bulk of the arguments was, the full 70 minutes before we got to this point about the discussion of the grand jury return, it was about Donald Trump's behavior toward Comey over many, many years. And not only did the defense bring up that tweet where Donald Trump tweeted to the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, saying you should charge James Comey, Letitia James, and Adam Schiff with crimes, it also went the whole way back, and the defense painted this picture of Donald Trump responding every time James Comey was publicly criticizing Trump as president, as the person who fired him, when Comey was writing his book. Each of those moments where Comey was speaking on the public stage critically of Trump, Trump was hitting back with some sort of public statement of his own, a tweet, a Truth Social post saying Comey should be facing some sort of consequences. So they're arguing that this prosecution, when it ultimately did come about, it was a choice made to deprive Comey of his First Amendment protections to criticize the president. Pam?
All right, Caitlin Polance, thank you so much. A lot happening today out there.
Joining us now is the former federal prosecutor, Ankush Kaduri. He's also a senior writer for Politico magazine. Ankush, thanks so much for joining us. Always good to have you here in the Situation Room. Walk us through what we're expecting from today's hearing.
Well, look, the judge has a host of motions that he has set for a hearing this morning. And you could expect, I think, the focus of the questioning and the judge's interest today to be on the motion that Comey's lawyers have filed alleging that he is the victim of selective and vindictive prosecution at the hands of the Trump administration. Two slightly different arguments, but effectively that Comey was singled out as a result of
Hey guys, let's just touch on quickly what selective and vindictive prosecution is. So selective and vindictive prosecution are legal defenses that argue that the government unfairly targeted a defendant. Selective prosecution claims that a person was singled out for prosecution based on an impermissible classification. It can be like race, religion, while others similarly situated were not. Vindictive prosecution occurs when a prosecutor retaliates against a defendant for exercising a legal right. So this is pretty much what they're saying, and they have a ton of evidence to suggest that this is what this is. As we know that, Donald Trump is a boy in a man's body, and he went after this guy simply because he has an issue with him. And now his, crazy prosecutor with no experience, why he's talking about what is that, DEI? She must be a DEI hire because she doesn't even know her job. So this is going to be dismissed. This woman has presented false, fraudulent information to the judge. This is crazy. This entire administration is a bunch of damn clowns.
Animus on the part of the administration, and also that he's being treated differently from other similarly situated people, and he's being charged for something that other people wouldn't necessarily be charged with.
If the judge dismisses this case, Ankush, can the Trump administration pursue any other legal avenues against Comey?
So this is something of an open question, at least by the administration's reckoning. You would expect intuitively this case gets dismissed, the statute of limitations have already run. So you would think, okay, well, they may not have another avenue here. And I think that's probably right. However, there is a provision of law that the administration has cited that gives the Justice Department effectively another 6 months if an indictment has been dismissed for certain reasons. It is very, very unclear to me that that provision is meant to apply or should apply in a situation like this one, particularly if the other judge who has a hand in this case, who's handling the question of whether Lindsey Halligan was validly appointed, decides to dismiss the case on those grounds. So yes, there are some options available, but they will also be litigated if we get there.
During today's hearing, one of the prosecutors said Comey was indicted simply because he lied to Congress. Is that enough to fight Comey's push to dismiss this case?
It is not. I mean, Look, the Comey's lawyers have produced reams of communications, public social media posts from Trump, all about how he dislikes Comey and how Comey ought to be charged. The government cannot just wave away all of that evidence. Now, I will say the standards for prevailing on a vindictive prosecution or selective prosecution defense are quite high. However, Comey has unusually strong facts. I mean, it is just not every day, or really any day, that you see a defendant walk into court with reams of sheets of paper being able to say the president has been targeting me for years. And by the way, this case was sort of jerry-rigged. They had to go get another fire the actual prosecutor, install a different prosecutor in order to get this over the finish line. I mean, these are unusually compelling facts.
How is this case, Ankush, similar to some of the other challenges we've been hearing from, for example, the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, in your view?
Well, so for James, you know, they're somewhat similar, the arguments that she has made. Her lawyers have also made this argument about Halligan not being validly appointed. They have selective and vindictive prosecution arguments. She has less of, I think, a public record available to her in order to sort of bootstrap those arguments, but they're definitely not frivolous given the public record that does exist. She also doesn't really have the sort of the option that Comey may have to challenge a follow-on indictment on the theory that it's barred by the statute of limitations. You know, she has in some ways a better argument than Comey, not to jump around here, on the question of selective prosecution, because while Comey is being charged with lying to Congress, plenty of people have been charged with lying to Congress. The type of prosecution that has been brought against James is extremely rare. And there are plenty of cases, including cases involving the president's political allies, that might have attracted similar prosecutorial attention, but have not. So you can see in these cases, they differ and are similar in certain respects.
Ankush Kaduri, the former federal
Yeah, I don't know what, this is just too much. We have an administration that we can't even trust. We can't even trust these people. You know, this is a mess. Now, got something else for y'all. Now, we heard about the Epstein files. You know, they're supposed to get released. Of course, they're going to distract us with some more lies and some more bullshit. So after all of that work they did to get these Epstein files released, more than likely they are not going to be released. And if y'all don't believe me, let's get into this video right here. Because in this video, Pam Bondi is asked several times with regards to these Epstein files, and she's just playing word games. She never said one time that they're going to be released, but what she said is we gonna follow the law. These people never follows the law. Now, one of the things that they're saying is that Donald Trump is saying that he is opening up a new investigation with regards to the Epstein files. And they're saying the reason that he's doing that is because if there is an open case, they can say, oh, it's an open case. We cannot release the files. So y'all ain't gonna see them files. And here is Pam Bondi with her regular freaking games that she plays. She's been asked about the Epstein files. Just pay attention to how she answers these questions.
On the Epstein files, does the new investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
Did this lady say they will follow the law? This is the most lawless ass administration that ever existed. As you guys see, she never says yes. She says we will continue to follow the law. How are you going to release the files or not? More games. These files are not going to be released. Again, they're going to say they have an open investigation, and because they have an open investigation, they cannot release the files. Now, this woman is asked numerous times, different ways by different people, and this is how she responded.
What are the next steps, Madam Attorney General, for the DOJ regarding what we assume President Trump will sign into law with the Epstein files? Is this going to be on the Justice Department website? What are you doing here over the next 30 days, as we understand it.
We will continue to follow the law with
We will continue to follow the law. Yes or no, ho? You keep saying we're going to continue to follow the law. You guys, these files will not be released. This woman does not say yes. She says, we will continue to follow the law. A lawless administration that now says we're going to continue. You never freaking followed the law. That's the problem.
maximum transparency while protecting victims.
When you say follow the law, Madam Attorney General, do you mean that you will provide all the files by 30 days?
We will follow the law. The law passed both chambers last evening. It has not yet been signed, but we will continue to follow the law, again, while protecting victims, but also providing maximum transparency.
To that. Madam Attorney General, the DOJ statement earlier this year saying that the files would not release mentioned the fact that the review of the documents and the evidence did not suggest that any additional investigation of third parties was warranted. What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information. There's information that new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to.
Did you guys catch that? Oh, it's new information. It's additional information. There's no new information. It's just the files that everybody has been asking you all to release that you won't release. So now you say, oh, we have new information. We have new information, so we can't release the files. We got an open investigation. We can't release the files. We're dealing with a clown-ass administration.
Follow the law to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward, and we will continue to provide maximum transparency under the law.
Wedding, Madam General. On Ryan Wedding, you mentioned,
Madam Attorney General, the issue with the new information that you just indicated, is the department seeking information perhaps from the Epstein estate because Mr. Blanche did not have that information when he interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell? What new information? And would you limit the new investigation to just those named persons that the president talked about, or is this a broad, open-ended investigation?
I would refer to the Deputy Attorney General's post that he put out on X, and we're not going to say anything else on that because now it is a pending investigation.
It's a pending investigation. All this hoe does is lie, lie, lie. It's a pending investigation. Now suddenly there's a pending investigation. I'm sorry, folks. Have a nice evening. I cannot give you the Epstein files because we have an open investigation. What a joke administration. A bunch of idiots.
In the Southern District of New York. But you're on point.
There's a new investigation. You guys will not be getting the Epstein files. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I know we promised you all that you would be getting the Epstein files, but you know what we learned? We learned that as long as we say that we have an open investigation, we don't have to release the files because we love to protect, y'all know the word, the pedos. We gotta protect the pedos because we are, or they are, one themselves. Okay, we gotta protect. They got to protect their people. Here we go again with the same old BS. There will be no Epstein files because they are not going to release them. Nothing is going to be released. She was asked the same question numerous times, and each time she failed. Well, check this one out. I mean, same situation.
That he is charged with being responsible for $1 billion. Go ahead, now off topic.
On the Epstein files, does the new investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
What are the next steps, Madam Attorney General, for the DOJ regarding what we assume President Trump will sign into law with the Epstein files? Is this going to be on the Justice Department website? What are you doing here over the next 30 days as we understand it?
We will continue to follow the law with maximum transparency while protecting victims.
When you say follow the law, Madam Attorney General, do you mean that you will provide all the files by 30 days?
We will follow the law. The law passed both chambers last evening. It has not yet been signed, but we will continue to follow the law, again, while protecting victims, but also providing maximum transparency.
To that. Madam Attorney General, the DOJ statement earlier this year saying that the files would not release mentioned the fact that the review of the documents and the evidence did not suggest that any additional investigation of third parties was warranted. What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information. There's information new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward, and we will continue to provide maximum transparency under the law.
Wedding, Madam General. On Ryan Wedding, you mentioned.
Madam Attorney General, the issue with the new information that you just indicated, is the department seeking information perhaps from the Epstein estate because Mr. Blanche did not have that information when he interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell? What new information, and would you limit the new investigation to just those named persons that the president talked about, or is this a broad, open-ended investigation?
I would refer to the Deputy Attorney General's post that he put out on X, and we're not going to say anything else on that because now it is a pending investigation in the Southern District of New York. But you're on point. Hard stop. One more question? Sure.
President Trump has previously said that he may consider authorizing military strikes within Mexico to go after cartels. Given the importance of this case, I'm wondering if the DOD has been engaged on the search for Ryan.
Yeah, we're not going to discuss anything with the Department of War right now, but right now I will tell you it is the Treasury Department, the State Department, our office, the FBI, working with Canadian authorities and working with the Mexican authorities hand in hand. And that includes the Mexican military. You had one more on Wedding?
Yes, please.
Sure.
CBC, you mentioned a Canadian lawyer. If you can tell us more about it, the extradition of a Canadian lawyer. And also a question for Commissioner Michael Dreeben on 7 other individuals who are linked to Ryan Wedding. If you can tell us on the extradition, what are the next steps?
Sure. Do you want to take the Canadian? I think Bill will take the attorney because that attorney is being prosecuted in California, and then I'll turn it over to Director Dewey.
Yeah, the attorney, he's named in the indictment that was unsealed today. His name is Deepak Pardkar, Paradkar. He is a lawyer. I'll have the Canadian Police Commissioner provide more details. He was one of the people arrested yesterday. I understand he initially refused to come out of his home. He put up a little bit of resistance, but he was eventually taken into custody. It was very important for us to get him because when you have people who are officers of the court, who are lawyers, we take oaths to protect the public and defend the law. And when you have lawyers who are assisting international drug trafficking players on how to evade law enforcement and to murder witnesses, we can't have that stand. So it was very important to us that the lawyer be charged and the lawyer be brought to justice. I'll have the commissioner speak about the extradition process. There are about, I believe, 7 individuals that were arrested in Canada. We are still looking for one more individual in Canada, and they will all be extradited here to the U.S., where they will be brought to the Central District of California, and they will be charged and tried here in our court system. So I'll let the commissioner speak more about the arrests and the extradition process.
So thank you. I think he's covered quite a bit there with regards to the next steps and the ideas. Yesterday, we engaged in an operation following information that we received and arrest 7 out of 8 Canadians. All of them are currently locked up, waiting the extradition process. So they'll have a fair process in front of a judge, and then our Department of Justice will communicate with the justice here, and it will go through the steps of the extradition. But the premise is everybody will be charged in the United States. So, and you had something about 7. Is it something else?
Hear more about those 7 Canadians.
Well, the 7 Canadians were arrested.
I'm sorry, I'm not buying this shit. These people are clowns. Now all of a sudden they busted a drug cartel. Get these damn clowns off of my screen. I don't believe anything they say. What they're trying to do is not provide the Epstein files. We don't know who the hell you're talking about or what you're talking about. You're trying to get away from not releasing those files, but everybody is saying the same thing. And Pam Bondi, we're not buying your lies and what you're saying, because you are also a part of the PPP program, the Pedo Protection Program. Okay?
Political albatross has now come knocking on the door of the Oval Office now that the bill to release all files related to the criminal case of Donald Trump's former friend, the dead sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, has passed with near unanimous support from Congress. All that's left is Donald Trump's signature. Once the bill is signed, Team Trump will be stuck in a trap largely of their own making. The administration could have fulfilled a campaign pledge and released all the files months ago. Remember this?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that.
Do y'all remember that? Remember Donald Trump campaigned and said, oh, we're going to release the files, and Bimbo Pam Bondi, oh, they're on my desk. I'm just ready. I'm going to release them. These people been playing the entire time. A bunch of damn scam con artists stealing the money, because that's all they've been doing. I did a video the other day where there's, I think it's about $143 million that mysteriously is missing that they gave to a contractor that just decided to do business 2 days before the government gave them a $143 million contract. Now, me as a person that has been signed up to do business with the federal government, it's very difficult. Now, you can sign up, but I'm going to tell you this, the government is not going to pick you for your first opportunity for a $143 million contract.
But now, after months of stonewalling, the Trump administration
Let's rewind that, y'all.
Epstein has passed with near unanimous support from Congress. All that's left is Donald Trump's signature. Once the bill is signed, Team Trump will be stuck in a trap largely of their own making. The administration could have fulfilled a campaign pledge and released all the files months ago. Remember this?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that.
But now, after months of stonewalling, the Trump administration is bound by law, a law just passed by Congress to release all of the Epstein files. And frankly, the world is watching to see if there's any chance they comply. Here's what Attorney General Pam Bondi had to say when she was asked if the investigation Trump ordered into Democrats will be an excuse to stop the release.
On the Epstein files, does the new investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
Following the law and maximum transparency when it comes to the Epstein files, public isn't buying it. Those are two things this Department of Justice is not known for, even among Republicans. Again, if Pam Bondi wanted transparency when it comes to the Epstein material, she could have released the files instead of publishing an unsigned memo that said she wasn't gonna, that sought to sweep the whole thing under the rug. Comments like her comments today, though, are part of a pattern by Team Trump that suggests anything but maximum transparency, from that unsigned memo back in July to the shifting explanations for why Epstein and Trump had a falling out, to the preferential treatment the Trump administration has given to Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. On that front, NBC News has some new reporting that the Bureau of Prisons has fired the whistleblower who alleged to House Democrats that Maxwell was getting, quote, VIP treatment, as Congressman Jamie Raskin describes it. From that new reporting, quote, a whistleblower who came forward to House Democrats alleging convicted sex offender Ghislaine Maxwell received preferential treatment at a federal prison camp in Texas says she was not motivated by politics. Instead, quote, this was about common human decency and doing what's right for all inmates. That was Noella Turnage, a nurse who worked at the federal prison camp Bryan since 2019. She said that the Federal Bureau of Prisons fired her on November 10th. The decision came one day after the top Democrat on the committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, wrote a letter to President Donald Trump saying they had received information from a whistleblower indicating Maxwell was working on filing a commutation application and receiving special treatment not typically afforded to inmates at Bryan. A brand new chapter in the push for transparency around the Epstein case is where we start today. Joining us, Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He's the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. He has been pivotal in the push for the release of the Epstein files. Did you think 24, 72 hours ago that the vote to release the files would be near unanimous in the House and the Senate?
I did not. I mean, look, we were hoping that we could get maybe first 12 to 20 Republicans just a week ago. Then it became clear that we might get up to 100 Republicans just a few days ago. And then, of course, with Trump's complete panic when he knew he was going to lose the vote in a spectacular way, only then did we, of course, see the Speaker and others chime in where the vote became essentially unanimous. And the action, of course, of the Senate. This is a huge win for transparency, for the American public, for good government, but most importantly, this is a win for the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, who have been demanding action now for years. And so it's a good day for this country, but there is a lot of work ahead of us in the future.
Let me center our conversation then around the victims. Here is an Epstein survivor talking about something that people don't always remember that they hold, and that is the power to name names if they choose to. Let me play that for you.
Let me ask you something else, because again, it's much bigger than a couple of people. Were you trafficked to other people?
You can say yes, but you don't have to name names.
You only share what you want
Yeah,
to share. You don't have to be sorry for anything. And I'm asking you this because I think it's important to understand, as people do understand about Virginia's story, that it's not about just one person or two people. It's much bigger than that. You can share whatever you want to share.
Terrible things had happened to me within my time.
Okay, guys, I just want to jump on here to just address one of the comments. You guys keep saying that for years, Biden and Harris could have released the files. Okay. They could not release the files because, what is her name? Ghislaine or whatever. She was going through her trial or whatever. After that, she filed for an appeal. So unfortunately, I know you guys keep saying that and you keep thinking that, but this is how it works. If there's an ongoing, investigation, or if you're going through trial, they will not release the files. But let me kind of make sure you understand. That is why the Trump administration is now saying that they're opening up a new investigation, because they won't be releasing them either. I just want to let y'all know, because hey, I'm with y'all, because I was saying the same thing. Like, wait a minute, why didn't they? It was simply because they wouldn't have been able to release them anyways. It was an ongoing investigation. So I know y'all not going to believe that either, but hey, it is what it is. Believe whatever you like.
I'm with dealing with Jeffrey Epstein. I had encounters with people that I would rather not have
I think there's a lot of people that just want them to release the names. They're like, well, you have the names, just do it. The problem with that is that these rich and powerful men can they can sue you into homelessness, would be a big part of it, but B, it puts serious threat on your life and your family's life. There were times where my sister was sitting across people and they would push a picture of her own children in front of her and essentially say, I know where your kids go to school.
I know where your kids go to school. This is what the victims are dealing with right now.
That's right. And Nicole, I've spent some time talking to some of these survivors one-on-one whenever I can. I do that. I just did so a few days ago with another survivor. And one of the stories that she shared was about her sensing and knowing that she was being watched and that her home was being essentially watched and followed, and that she really feared the safety for herself and her family. So you can only imagine when some of the most powerful men in the country with unlimited resources and unlimited connections to the highest levels of government, what that feels like to be surviving, to know the trauma you've been through, but want to just protect your family, yourself, and your friends. And so we have to allow these survivors to tell their story on their time. But rest assured, the Oversight Committee and certainly Democrats on that committee, we are taking great care in our conversations with these survivors, and they're providing us very important information that we're very grateful for.
Who's watching them?
The question, who's following them?
Who's following them? Yeah. I mean, is it a government official or a private person's?
I'm not going to. I think that oftentimes they're not sure, and I'm not going to speak for all of them. In the conversations that I have had, I know of 2 survivors that directly told me that they certainly felt that they were being watched in the past, and that there was some type of surveillance happening that they felt to themselves and their family. And that's very serious. And so that's something that we take very seriously, and their protection and their safety in this moment is incredibly important to us. And we know that right now, Donald Trump has the power to release the files. He didn't need the vote in the Congress. He didn't need the subpoena that Oversight Committee Democrats placed on the files. Yet he continues to deny justice and closure and some sense of being able to move forward for these women and their families. And so this is an important moment right now where there's progress being made, but there's a lot of work ahead of us on the financial documents, on ensuring the files are released by the DOJ, on Pam Bondi being held accountable for her actions. And those are things you're going to hear a lot about in the coming days. If Donald Trump and the White House thinks that we're slowing down or this is over, they are mistaken. We are actually just beginning this work.
What does it even mean that Trump has ordered an investigation into Democrats? If you're investigating the deceased sex offender, don't you start with the known criminals, Epstein and Maxwell, and follow the facts? I mean, what do you understand the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, Jay Clayton, to have undertaken? An investigation whose ends are known, or an actual fact-driven investigation?
Nicole, this is a really good question. I want to actually make something really clear. I've heard some discussion on your network and others about the difference between, for example, the discharge petition that Congress voted on almost unanimously, and the subpoena that's in place, that the Oversight Committee put in place. They both ask for the same things, which are full release of the documents. Pam Bondi, in the clip you showed earlier, said, well, we've already released 33,000 documents. That's because Oversight Democrats forced a subpoena that's currently still in place for all of the documents, and she was responding to that subpoena. Now, we know that those documents were essentially already available to the public, so it was just a smokescreen. But that was a response to our subpoena. The discharge petition and the law in front of the president is another way of getting the documents. But here's where this investigation you're discussing is important. We know that that is a sham investigation. We believe it's being set up because in the law that was passed in the Khanna and Massey bill, there is a provision in there that essentially speaks to that the Department of Justice is able to possibly withhold some materials if there is an ongoing federal investigation. This has been discussed at length. And so folks are worried, is Pam Bondi, is Donald Trump, are they launching an investigation, particularly this one against Democrats, to use it as a way to stop the release of the files and of this bill? And that is a critical concern. What has not been discussed in the last few days, and we've been focused on this bill, I want to remind the Attorney General and the public that our subpoena does not have that language. And so if the Attorney General wants to use her sham investigation in the Southern District of New York to withhold evidence and documents on the bill that the president will hopefully just about to sign, she can't do the same for our subpoena. She is still legally obligated, regardless of any investigation, to produce every single document, photo, video, or material that she has in her possession of the DOJ to the Oversight Committee. That's something that we have not talked about a lot in the last few days because our focus is on this bill. But you can believe that in the next few days and weeks ahead, we're going to remind the DOJ that her investigation she might try to use to stop the effort in the full House. She can't use that to stop the effort we have in the Oversight Committee.
Well, let me just let y'all know this, okay? Donald Trump and his administration, and I know all of y'all didn't see this video, they're stealing. They're lying, they're stealing, they're clowns. We know Donald Trump is a multiple felon. I mean, why is he even there, okay? When he is a multiple felon, stealing, can't trust his ass. But there is a video. I think I just kind of clicked out of it. Jeez, I clicked out of it. I want to show y'all this video with regards to the $143 million that they mysteriously gave to a business that just opened 2 days prior to getting the contract. Yeah, it's a scam. It's a scam. It's a scam. And now I just lost my video, but just give me a second. I can find it. DHS, $143 million scam. Found it. Here we go. Okay. So I had mentioned to you all before, and I've been saying this forever, that all Donald Trump doing is, on top of the corruption, he's stealing. So let's get into this, y'all, where they've been exposed for this money that they stole.
Today, ProPublica published quite a scoop about Trump DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, that in any other era, I should say, would be a career-ending scandal. But to understand the pattern of corruption of this woman, we just have to zoom out just a little bit, just for a moment. Because since Noem took over DHS at the beginning of the year, she's become known for appearing to be more obsessed with putting on various costumes than doing her actual job. I mean, she donned a bulletproof vest just to talk to her own agents. She wore a Customs and Border Patrol uniform on Fox News. And of course, she is constantly, and I mean constantly, throwing on a cowboy hat and riding horses, always with plenty of cameras around to capture the moment. But Noem's apparent obsession with image actually goes much further than just putting on costumes, because she has directed more than 200 million taxpayer dollars into TV ads to promote her work at DHS. And just to put it in context, that is nearly twice what DHS spent on ads altogether in all of last year. And the content of those ads have already been a scandal kind of in and of themselves.
I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border.
And if you were wondering who exactly the target audience is for that, DHS spent $30,000 to run that ad, the one I just showed you, specifically in the ad market where Mar-a-Lago is. Now, as much as spending tens of thousands of dollars to make sure your ad plays on the TV near the president is a bizarre waste of taxpayer money, $30,000, it turns out, is a drop in the bucket compared to the more than $200 million DHS has spent this year making and airing ads. And the rest of that money is where the story gets truly bonkers. I mean, since March, we have known that DHS skipped the normal competitive bidding process when giving out the contracts to make and air these ads. DHS claimed that because Trump declared an emergency at the southern border, they didn't have to waste time getting competitive bids. And that brings me to the first part of ProPublica's big scoop today. Because it turns out that the majority of that no bid contract money, 143 million taxpayer dollars, went to this kind of mysterious LLC in Delaware. An LLC that was created just days before it got that no bid contract, just days. And the man who owns the home that LLC lists as its address did not respond to ProPublica's questions. Now, when asked why the agency chose that LLC, DHS said, quote, "The results speak for themselves," and then proceeded to claim that Trump has made the border the most secure it has been in American history. Not exactly answering the question. So DHS gave a $143 million no bid contract to a brand new LLC that no one seems to know anything about. That is obviously a scandal enough to begin with. Then there's this. This is an ad Kristi Noem shot on October 2nd, which, by the way, was the second day of the government shutdown. So while hundreds of thousands of federal workers went without pay, including the nearly 50,000 TSA workers that work under Noem, Noem donned a cowboy hat and had a production company film her riding horseback with buffalo. And whether or not you care about the very weird content of the ad, you should care about who made it. Because according to ProPublica's new reporting, that ad was made by a company called Strategy Group, which is run by a man who is not only the husband of Noem's chief DHS spokesperson, Tricia McLaughlin, yes, she's a something, but also has personal and business ties to Noem herself. And the company's name, Strategy Group, does not appear on any of the public documents about the contract. Instead, the group listed on the contract is the mysterious Delaware LLC that DHS gave that $143 million contract to. I should say that DHS said in a statement to ProPublica that it does all of its contracting by the book. Okay. But the office in charge of funding ad contracts at DHS is the Office of Public Affairs, which is run by none other than DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin. And when she was asked about why DHS ended up using her husband's company, Strategy Group, to make that ad, she replied with this: "We don't have visibility into why they were chosen. I don't know who they're a subcontractor with, but I don't work with them because I have a conflict of interest and I fully recuse myself. My marriage is one thing and work is another. I don't combine them. Well, Tricia, they seem pretty freaking combined right now, don't they? I mean, her husband, the CEO of Strategy Group, Ben Yoho, did not respond to ProPublica's questions. So not only did DHS give a $143 million no-bid contract to an unknown LLC, but that unknown LLC then hired someone tied to Noem, someone literally married to the Noem aide in charge of giving out DHS ad contracts. And believe it or not, this is not the first scandal about Noem and this company, the Strategy Group. See, back when she was governor, Noem's office hired Strategy Group to make these ads. Yet again, a lot of costumes going on here. This is Noem dressed as a state trooper, a construction worker, a nurse, an accountant. Here's Noem dressed as an electrician, a welder, a dentist, and my favorite, a plumber. There were a lot of these ads, millions of dollars worth, paid for by South Dakota taxpayers. Those ads were the result of a bidding process, and the state says the process was done by the book. But ProPublica reports that a former official from Noem's South Dakota governor's office has since alleged that the bidding process was rigged. The former official said that a top Noem aide told them the governor would be angry if Strategy Group didn't win the contract. And then contemporaneous text messages reviewed by ProPublica corroborated that account, showing that senior Noem administration officials pushing for Strategy Group to get the contract. There's all that. Noem, of course, denies those allegations. I should note that MSNBC has not independently verified ProPublica's reporting. But if this reporting is accurate, and it's very detailed, and a company run by someone with personal and business ties to Noem herself has managed to score government contracts, huge ones, from Noem's agency with no bidding process and literally zero transparency, that should at least very much be a call for an investigation from somewhere, if not cause for Noem to be forced to ride off in the sunset on one of those horses.
$143 million scam, okay? They ain't doing shit but scamming, stealing, and corruption. But one person knows what's up.
Hearing. Since January, Donald Trump has used the full power of the federal government to attack Americans in cities across the country. In Donald Trump's America, you are at increased risk of experiencing militaristic operations in your home, increased risk of being subject to detainment by mass thugs and wannabe vigilantes, increased risk of suffering injuries due to reckless and illegal acts by rogue federal agents, increased risk of being deported to foreign nations, even if you are an American citizen. And you're at an increased risk of being targeted by federal government for criticizing the president and his friends. Congressional Republicans have completely abandoned their Article I powers and have exchanged their responsibility to their constituents with fealty to the president. They have allowed the president to morph federal agencies into instruments of autocracy. And as a result, the president has been able to ignore federal law, disregard court orders, and implement the largest pay-for-play scheme in American history. The White House, well, what's left of it anyway, is literally up for sale. The federal courts have characterized this presidency as, quote, lawless. In fact, when ruling against illegal acts committed by the administration, a Republican-appointed federal judge stated, quote, the court cannot imagine how the public interest might be served by permitting federal officials to flaunt the very laws they have sworn to enforce. In a separate case where the administration was sued for unlawful acts, the judge, also a Republican appointee, stated, quote, allowing constitutional rights to be dependent upon the grace of the executive branch would be a dereliction of duty by this third and independent branch of government and would be against the public interest. But in another case, the court summed it up perfectly by declaring, quote, as is becoming far too common, we are confronted again with the efforts of the executive branch to set aside the rule of law in pursuit of its own goals. Judiciary Committee Republicans have been completely complicit in this corruption. But since they're so interested in restoring law and order, I have a couple of suggestions on where they can start. Number one, this is the President of the United States standing beside his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. As we all know, Mr. Epstein is one of the most notorious sexual predators in American history.
Donald Trump standing beside his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I don't know about your best friend, but do your best friend mess around with children?
For 8 weeks, the Republicans on this committee have chosen to protect these two men instead of providing justice to Mr. Epstein's victims. Now the administration is panicking. First, they campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. Then AG Bondi and associates did a photo op with the files. And she said, and I quote, the Epstein list is on my desk. Then somehow the Epstein list didn't exist. Then the Epstein files became a Democratic hoax. Now the president is supposedly supportive of releasing the files, even though he's currently ignoring a congressional subpoena to do so. Now the president is simply crashing out. And it's because he can't seem to explain his special decades-long relationship with one of the most prominent sexual predators in American history. It's already public that he's in the Epstein files, but his administration is hiding the context of his involvement, if any, with Mr. Epstein's horrific crimes. Now, this is Miss Ghislaine Maxwell. Miss Maxwell, who obviously helped Jeffrey Epstein traffic more than 1,000 women and girls, well, Donald Trump is now giving her special treatment while she's serving out her prison sentence. He won't even rule out giving her a pardon or commuting her sentence. I don't need to explain why pardoning sex traffickers wouldn't be restoring law and order. Now, this is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars.
Wait a minute. Didn't we just watch a video about the $143 million that just disappeared to some LLC that just started business 2 days ago, and the Trump administration gives them a $143 million contract? Suspicious.
In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm. And the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts.
They are stealing the money. That's what I just said. They are stealing the money. What did Donald Trump say? They are eating the animals. They are stealing the money. When Donald Trump gets out of this office, hopefully he goes from this office to a small cell. He is stealing the money. He's stealing the money.
Now we move on to yet somebody else.
Let's go back.
American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. Now we move on to yet somebody else. This is the so-called border czar, Tom Homan. Mr. Homan is on tape accepting $50,000 in cash bribes stuffed in a brown paper bag from an undercover FBI agent. Apparently, Mr. Homan accepted these bribes in exchange for awarding federal contracts to his friends. Trump's Department of Justice killed the investigation into Mr. Homan's crimes, and congressional Republicans didn't say a mumbling word. Lastly, this is insurrectionist and Nazi sympathizer Ed Martin. It appears that Mr. Martin is functioning as the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Pardon Attorney, Director of the Fake Weaponization Working Group, and Special Attorney for Mortgage Fraud. All that means is that Mr. Martin is Trump's lapdog, whom the president sends to initiate lawsuits against the president's perceived political opponents. This is what we call organized crime. They're breaking the law, often by stealing taxpayer dollars, covering up their crimes by ending and obstructing investigations.
They're pedos, they're stealing the money, organized crime. Get these MFers out of here.
Then prosecuting people who call out their unlawful behavior. And while the Republicans are encouraging this corruption, they're abandoning actual victims of violent crime and ignoring the Republican-led state's 21st century murder crisis. In September's appropriation markup, congressional Republicans proposed reducing the FBI staff by thousands of positions and underfunding the agency by more than $1 billion. They've proposed slashing resources from the ATF. They've proposed cutting grants for juvenile justice programs and hate crimes, and eliminating the community violence intervention and prevention grants. They're literally defunding the police. So no matter what they say at today's hearing, congressional Republicans have proven that they are not investing in keeping American communities safe from violent crime. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
They are only into the PPP program. That is the Pedo Protection Program. That is all they're interested in. They're interested in that. They're interested in organized crime and stealing the money. That is all they're interested in. Okay, Donald Trump has 30. How many felonies does this clown has? Who did you guys elect to be your president? A man who's been sued for doing some nasty stuff to a woman with his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. Trump is going down, and I can't wait till he go to prison.